Mr. Smith, thank you for being here today. Earlier the chairman spent a lot of time talking about Cassidy Hutchinson, who we know was just one of many witnesses. It's important to note that there was testimony that she was told something by Mr. Ornato, not that she had personal knowledge. And of course, Mr. Ornato was of very questionable veracity. We had a testimony from a Metropolitan Police Department official about an argument, a big argument that the president was having about going to the Capitol. And in fact, the vehicle was delayed going back to the Capitol while that argument occurred. But having said that, I want to focus on something my colleagues across the aisle seem to want to ignore. The fact that your investigation into President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election was built on testimony from members of the Republican Party. In fact, last week, the New York Times published grand jury transcripts from Georgia that show the same pattern in Trump's Georgia criminal case. Georgia's Republican Attorney General Chris Carr testified that he told, quote, and this is a quote, "We're just not seeing the things that you are seeing." And the late Georgia House Speaker David Ralston, also a Republican, testified that Trump's fake elector scheme was, quote, "the craziest thing I've heard." And then there's Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the president's closest allies. In his secret grand jury testimony, Senator Graham told the jurors, quote, "I have told him more times than we can count that he fell short," unquote. And then he said this, quote, "If you told him Martians came and stole votes, he'd be inclined to believe it." Martians, that's from Senator Graham speaking under oath. So here's my question. Mr. Smith, in your deposition with this committee, you testified, and here's a quote, "Our case was built on, frankly, Republicans who put their allegiance to the country before the party." That the president's closest allies are telling him that his claims of election fraud are wrong. And so I'm just wondering, can you explain what you meant in your deposition that it was Republicans who were putting their allegiance to their country ahead of their party?
Yes. There were witnesses who I felt would be very strong witnesses, including, for example, the Secretary of State in Georgia, who told Donald Trump the truth, told him things that he did not want to hear, and put him on notice that what he was saying was false. These were people who knew how the elections were conducted in these states, and I believe that witnesses of that nature, witnesses who are willing to tell the truth, even if it's going to impose a cost on them in their lives, my experience as a prosecutor over 30 years is that witnesses like that are very credible, and that jurors tend to believe witnesses like that because they pay a cost for telling the truth.
In terms of the grand jury testimony that's now been released, the fact that Donald Trump, according to Senator Graham, would believe that Martians stole the election, what does that tell you about Trump's state of mind?
That statement is consistent with what we found in our investigation, in that our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state. On the other hand, when individuals would say things that would allow him to stay in power, no matter how fantastical, he would latch on to those. That pattern, over time, we felt was powerful evidence that he, in fact, knew that the fraud claims he was making were false.
You know, who were some of the Republican witnesses who told you that who told President Trump that his claims of election fraud were false? Can you share that with us?
There were a range of witnesses. They ranged from people on his campaign team who had wanted him to win, were employed to help him win the election. They included state officials, state Republican officials, who wanted him to win, voted for him, campaigned for him, asked him and his co-conspirators to provide evidence to support their claims, and invariably they never did. It included officials, advisors, people he worked with in the White House who he relied upon for important decisions and who he trusted in other contexts. We felt we had strong evidence from a variety of sources.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
Mr. Chairman, with my fellow Californian, you were allowing the witness
Yeah, it's a
to
good
answer.
question. Isn't that grounds to let him answer?
I've given him 30 seconds extra, the gentlelady 30 seconds extra. If the gentleman can be concise and finish up here quickly, we will allow him to finish.
Yes, sir. And just conclude saying we felt that constituted powerful evidence of the knowing falsity of his statements in furtherance of the fraud.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield back, noting the presence of officers who were severely attacked.
Got nothing to yield back. You're a minute over. The gentleman from
Protecting
Texas.
our lives on January 6th.
Wait just a second. We have one more thing to share.
We want to say a heartfelt thank you for watching and supporting PBS News.
Without you, we simply wouldn't be able to provide the news and the information that you trust.
So thank you from everybody here at PBS News.
Support journalism you trust. Support PBS News. Donate now, or even better, start a monthly contribution today.